The restaurant on South Congress was supposed to be my brother's masterpiece. 23 missed calls in one night changed everything I thought I knew about the people who raised me. I almost didn't see them. I keep my phone face down on the nightstand when I sleep because I value the 7 hours of quiet I get between a Tuesday shift and a Wednesday opening at the pharmacy. I am a licensed pharmacist. I count things for a living. I measure precisely. I do not deal in approximations or maybes, or will figure it out laters. My brother Daniel has never understood that about me, which is probably why we've always existed in separate orbits even when we were growing up in the same house in Phoenix. It was a Wednesday in late October when I woke up at 2:48 inches the morning to the kind of notification stack that makes your stomach drop before your brain even processes the numbers. 23 missed calls, 41 text messages, 2 voicemails I hadn't even known were left. The breakdown went like this. My mother had called 9 times, my father 6, Daniel 4 times, and then a scattering of aunts and cousins, and one number I didn't recognize at all with an Austin area code. I lay still for a moment in my dark Seattle apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of rain against the window. Something heavy settled in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. The way you recognize a smell from childhood before you can name what it is. I knew before I pressed play on the first voicemail that this was going to cost me something. But I need to back up 3 months because the story doesn't start at 2:48 inches the morning. It starts with a phone call from my mother on a Sunday afternoon in August, when she told me, her voice bright and full of the particular enthusiasm she reserves for things that involve spending money neither she nor my father has, that Daniel was finally doing it. He was opening the restaurant. Daniel had been talking about his restaurant since he was 19. He had a name for it. A logo he'd sketched in the margins of his high school notebooks. A vision of exposed brick and locally sourced ingredients, and a cocktail menu that would anchor the whole experience. He'd gone to culinary school on a partial scholarship, and my parents had covered the rest, a fact that had never been mentioned in relation to the $47,000 in student loans I'd taken out for my own degree. But I had stopped keeping score somewhere around my late 20s because the math of resentment doesn't compound into anything useful. For 15 years, the restaurant had lived in the future tense. Then Daniel met a man named Trevor at a food festival in Scottsdale. Trevor was, according to my mother, a very successful businessman. An investor. He had money and he believed in Daniel's vision, and together they were going to open Ember and Salt on South Congress Avenue in Austin, Texas. The lease was signed. The build-out was underway. The soft opening was scheduled for the 3rd weekend of October, and my parents were flying to Austin to be there for it. I was not invited. That is not entirely accurate. I was told the dates in the same tone you use to mention the weather informational. Not anticipatory, my mother added, almost as an afterthought, that Daniel thought it might be too much chaos for an opening weekend with everyone there. I translated that correctly as Daniel, not wanting me there to ask the questions I always ask. Where is the investor documentation? What are the operating capital reserves? What does the lease actually say about the first-year rent escalation clause? I had met Daniel's excitement with caution my entire adult life, and he had met my caution with contempt. We had reached a detente of distance. I sent a gift, a professional-grade Japanese knife set, and I did not book a flight. What I did do, sometime in late September, was call my mother to say that I was not available to wire money during the opening weekend, regardless of what came up. I said it plainly, not unkindly. I had learned by then that kindness in my family gets interpreted as flexibility. I said, I love you and I support Daniel's dream, but I am not a backup funding source. My mother laughed in the way she does when she's heard you but decided not to. She said, Oh, Serena, no one is asking you for anything. We're fine. I want that sentence on record. We're fine. On the Friday before the soft opening, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Honey, Trevor's accountant flagged a last-minute issue with the equipment lease. Nothing serious. Can you Venmo Dad $3,400 to bridge the gap until the investor transfer clears on Monday? I stared at the message for longer than I should have because I was trying to decide if there was a version of this that was legitimate. There wasn't. Equipment lease gaps don't close over a weekend via Venmo. That's not how any of it works. I typed back. No. I told you both before the opening that I wasn't available for this. Please call the equipment vendor directly and explain the timeline. I hope the opening is beautiful. My mother texted me 20 minutes later. Daniel is going to see this as you not supporting him. Do you know how hard he has worked? I put my phone in my desk drawer and went back to the patient file I'd been reviewing. I did not hear from them again until 2:48 inches the morning 4 days later. I pressed play on my father's voicemail first. His voice was the voice of a man standing in the wreckage of something. Clipped, barely controlled. Serena, call me back right now. It's an emergency. Trevor is gone. The restaurant, just call me back. Behind him, I could hear my mother's voice. Not words exactly. Just a continuous sound at the high end of her register that I associated with the times she felt the world was treating her unfairly. I called him back. He answered before the first ring finished. Dad. What happened? He took a breath that sounded like it had been dragged up from somewhere very far down. Trevor's gone. He said it the same way someone says a person has died, that kind of gone, and for one disorienting moment I thought he meant literally. Then he kept talking, and I understood. Trevor had pulled his funding 3 days before the soft opening. Not just pulled, it vanished. His cell phone went straight to voicemail. His LLC, which my father kept calling the investment company, had been administratively dissolved by the state of Texas 4 months ago. The build-out was 90% complete. The equipment was leased in Daniel's name, and also, my father said, pausing for one beat too long, in some of our names, just to make the paperwork easier. You know how these things work. What names? I said. Your mother's. Mine. He paused again. The soft opening went ahead anyway, because Daniel thought he could get bridge financing. The health department came on the second night. Something with the ventilation certification that Trevor's contractor had apparently never properly filed. They shut the place down. Temporarily, the inspector said, but temporary means nothing when you have 40 guests and a full kitchen and a social media launch that had been building for 6 weeks. Daniel had a breakdown in the dining room. My mother called 911 because she thought he was having a heart attack. He wasn't. He's at the hospital now. He's okay, but the restaurant, the vendors are calling. The equipment company is threatening to repossess everything by Friday. There's a loan. What loan? I said. A business line of credit. Daniel needed it when Trevor's first transfer was delayed. Back in July. The bank required more collateral than Daniel had, so he stopped. I was already sitting up in bed with my laptop open. I logged into my credit monitoring dashboard. I hadn't checked it in 6 weeks because I set it up on autopilot after I read an article about identity theft 2 years ago, and then forgot I had done it. Dad, I said quietly, how much is the loan? $78,000, he said. But the current outstanding balance is about $47,000 after Daniel's payments. I was looking at my screen. A red banner I had never seen before sat at the top of the dashboard. Alert. New hard inquiry detected. Date. July 14th. Creditor. Lone Star Business Capital LLC. Type. Commercial line of credit. Personal guarantor. I clicked through. My name was listed as personal guarantor on a $78,000 commercial credit line issued to Ember and Salt LLC. My social security number. My home address in Seattle. My credit score had absorbed the hard pull and the open account, and I had not known about any of it. My hands were completely steady. That is the thing about being the responsible one for your entire life. The adrenaline has nowhere useful to go, so it just flattens into a kind of very cold clarity. Dad, I said, who is the personal guarantor on the Lone Star Business Capital loan? Silence. Say it out loud, I said. We didn't think you'd mind, he said, and his voice had shifted. The panic was still there, but something else had crept in underneath it, something almost defensive, almost prepared. You have the best credit score in the family. You never use it. Daniel needed the guarantee to qualify, and Trevor was supposed to cover everything before it ever. You used my social security number, I said, without asking me, without telling me. We were going to tell you after the opening, when it was a success. We were going to show you the numbers, and you were going to see that it worked. And then, you committed fraud, I said. That sentence came out very quietly, and I think the quietness of it scared him more than if I had shouted. Don't say that word, he snapped. That word is not fair. We are your family. We are in crisis. Daniel is in a hospital bed and you are sitting in Seattle saying words like that at 3 in the morning instead of helping us. The equipment company will repossess everything by Friday. If that happens, the loan goes into default and your name is on the default. Do you understand what that does to your credit? Your career? You're a licensed pharmacist, Serena. A default judgment on a fraudulent guarantee. He let the sentence sit there unfinished because he knew I could complete it. I could lose my license in a board review. I could lose my apartment. I could spend 3 years in credit recovery. They had not planned this maliciously, I don't think. That's the part that took me the longest to fully absorb. It wasn't calculated evil. It was something almost worse than that. It was the absolute certainty, deep in their bones, that I would fix it, because I always fixed it, and that the fixing would make it fine, and that fine would retroactively justify everything they had done to get there. You want me to pay $47,000, I said, to cover a default on a loan I never agreed to, for a restaurant I was not invited to, that failed because your investor was a fraud and my brother didn't do due diligence. When you say it like that, my mother's voice came suddenly. She had been on the line the whole time. I realized, silent, waiting. When you say it like that, it sounds terrible. But Serena, if you don't pay this, your name is the one that takes the hit. We did this to protect Daniel. We used you because you're strong, because you have what it takes, because you're the one who can handle it. I sat with those words for exactly 4 seconds. Then I said, "Put the hospital on hold. I need to make some calls." My mother made a sound of relief. My father started to say thank you. I hung up before he finished. I did not call the equipment company. I did not call an attorney, though I would do that by 7 that morning. What I did first was pull up the contact number for my bank's 4-hour fraud division, because the moment someone uses your social security number and your credit history to open a financial account without your knowledge or consent, the correct name for that is not a family decision. The correct name is identity theft. And the correct response is not to cover it. The correct response is to report it. The woman who answered at the fraud line had the particular calm professionalism of someone who has heard every version of a bad night there is to hear. I told her my name. I told her the account number from my dashboard. I told her I was calling from Seattle, Washington, and I had documentation showing that I was not in Texas in July and had never authorized this guarantee. She walked me through the process without judgment or urgency, step by step, and there was something almost medicinal about the efficiency of it. This is what systems are for. Not to punish people you love, to impose order on chaos that should never have been yours to absorb. By 4:15 the morning, I had filed the initial fraud dispute with my bank, placed a security freeze on all 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and sent an email to the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division with the account documentation attached. I had also, very quietly, screen captured every text message my father had sent me over the previous 3 months, including the Venmo request from the Friday before the opening, and saved them to an encrypted folder in my cloud storage. At 4:23, my phone began to ring again. I looked at the screen. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Then Daniel. From a number I assumed was a hospital room phone. Then my cousin Britt, who has been my mother's proxy in every family conflict since we were teenagers. I let them all go. I had one more call to make before I slept. I called my father back at 4:31. He answered instantly. "Serena, thank God. What are you doing? Have you wired anything yet?" The equipment company opens at. "Dad," I said. "I need you to listen to me, and I need you to understand that I am saying this clearly, and I am not going to repeat it. I have filed a fraud report with my bank. I have frozen my credit. I have contacted the Texas AG's office. I am not paying the loan. I am not a guarantor, because I never agreed to be one, and the signature on that document is not legally mine." There was a silence so complete that I could hear the hospital PA system faintly in the background of wherever he was standing. Then, "You can't do this to us. I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I'm undoing something you did to me. They will come after Daniel. The default will destroy him. He is in a hospital bed, Serena. Your brother." "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry he's in pain. I genuinely am. But the answer to his pain is not my financial destruction. "You are so cold," my father said, and I could hear his voice breaking. "How did you become this cold?" "I learned it," I said. "Watching you." I pressed end. I set my phone to do not disturb. I lay back down in the dark and I stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the rain. And I let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened, not the legal parts, not the financial parts, but the human part, the part where you have to accept, somewhere around 4:30 in the morning, that the people you needed most to protect you were the ones you most needed protection from. I did not sleep. At 6, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and my notebook, and I built the timeline. Every text, every call, every piece of documentation, organized chronologically with source notes. I am a pharmacist. I document everything. It is the habit that saves lives, and it turned out it was going to save mine as well. At 7, I called an attorney I had been referred to by a colleague who dealt with a contract dispute the previous year. I left a voicemail. She called me back at 7:43. She told me that based on what I described, I had a strong case for identity theft and unauthorized use of personally identifying information, both of which are criminal offenses under federal law and Texas state law. She also told me, and this part I want to say clearly for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation, that paying the debt to make it go away would have been the worst possible thing I could have done. It would have implied acknowledgement. It would have made me the responsible party in the eyes of the creditor and potentially the court. The fraud report was the right first move. The freeze was the right second move. Attorney was the right third. Over the next 2 weeks, my family called me 47 more times across every channel available to them. My mother's sisters, who I had loved since I was small, left me voicemails telling me I was destroying the family. Britt sent me a text that said Daniel had checked himself out of the hospital and that whatever happened next was on my conscience. My father sent a 3-page email that used the word ungrateful 11 times. I read it once, forwarded it to my attorney, and did not respond. The equipment was repossessed. The loan went into a dispute process through the fraud claim. My attorney sent a certified letter to my parents' Phoenix address outlining the fraudulent use of my identifying information and requesting that they cooperate fully with the bank's investigation. My father called her directly, which she told me about with a level of professional neutrality I deeply respected. He had told her that I was breaking up the family over money. She had told him that wasn't her area of expertise. I want to tell you that there was a moment of dramatic confrontation, the kind where someone breaks down and says, "I'm sorry," and you can see in their eyes that they mean it. There wasn't. What there was instead was a certified letter from Lone Star Business Capital acknowledging the fraud dispute and initiating an investigation into the guarantee documentation. There was a call from the Texas AG's Consumer Protection Office following up on my complaint. There was a very quiet Tuesday afternoon when I got a notification that the unauthorized inquiry had been removed from my credit report and my score, which had dropped 14 points when the account opened, had been fully restored. There was no apology. Probably there will never be one, because an apology would require my parents to hold a version of themselves in their minds that they are not capable of holding. They would have to see themselves as people who stole their daughter's identity to fund their son's dream, and then tried to use her fear of consequences to make her pay for the fallout. That is a true thing, and it is also a thing that would cost them their entire self-narrative, and most people will protect their self-narrative long after they've sacrificed everything else. I unblocked my mother's number about 3 months later, not because I forgave her, not yet, but because I wanted to make a choice rather than just maintain a position. She texted me within an hour of the unblock. Just 2 words. "Are you okay?" I looked at those words for a long time. I thought about everything they didn't say. I thought about the apartment I live in and the license on my wall and the credit score I rebuilt not from damage she caused but from a dispute I won. I thought about the fact that I was, objectively, okay, more okay than I had been in years. In fact, because there is a particular exhaustion that comes with being a family's financial safety net that I hadn't even named until it was gone. I texted back, "I will be." And I left it at that. Daniel's restaurant is gone. The South Congress location has been taken over by a taco concept with good Yelp reviews. He is cooking at a hotel restaurant in Scottsdale now, which by all accounts he is good at, and which requires none of my credit history to sustain. I have not spoken to him directly, I don't know that I will for a while. There is grief in that, a real grief, not a performed one. I grew up with him. I remember exactly what his face looked like the Christmas he got his first real chef's knife, the way he held it like it was something sacred. That person is someone I loved. The person who signed paperwork in my name without asking is someone I am still working to understand. What I know is this. The call I made at 4:31 inches the morning was the most expensive call of my life, and also the least costly option available to me. I have been doing the math on that ever since, and it keeps coming out the same way. You cannot let someone else's crisis become your catastrophe, just because the alternative is conflict. You cannot let someone use the language of love to describe what is legally theft. And you cannot, under any circumstances, assume that because someone is family, they are safe. Safety is a thing you build, carefully, over time, with people who have earned it. It is not a thing that transfers through bloodline. If you don't take anything else from this, take the practical part. Freeze your credit at all 3 bureaus right now. Not when something goes wrong. Set a financial alert on every account you own for any transaction above $50. Know exactly what your credit report says at all times. The account my family opened in my name sat there for 6 weeks before I caught it, 6 weeks in which I could have been more exposed than I was. Don't give anyone that window, not even people you trust, especially not people you trust. Because trust is the exact mechanism that fraud exploits. I made myself coffee the morning after I filed the fraud report. I sat at my kitchen table in the early light, still in the clothes I'd slept in, watching the city come awake through the window. Seattle mornings in October are gray and still and oddly forgiving. I drank the coffee slowly. I thought about nothing, or tried to. My phone was quiet for the first time in weeks. The silence had a texture to it, not empty, but earned. I am 31 years old. I have a studio apartment I pay for myself, a career I built without anyone's financial backing, and a credit score that accurately reflects the way I actually live. I have a mother who may eventually understand what she did, and a father who probably won't, and a brother who is, I hope, learning something from the rubble of a dream that deserved better support than it got. I have an attorney I can call. I have documentation of everything, and I have the knowledge, which sits quietly at the back of everything now like a compass you didn't know you needed, that when the moment came, the moment when the people who were supposed to protect you handed you the bill for their choices and called it love, I did not pay it. That knowledge tastes like black coffee in a quiet apartment at sunrise. Bitter, yes. Warm, and entirely mine.